doing today and on last Friday for some of you guys. And this is the total revenue test. This is all about elasticity. Good job, Freeze. So what we want to remember is we want to make sure that we know that when the price, I always write it as decrease, and I told you guys that in class. When the price decreases and total revenue decreases, this is going to be inelastic. Oopsie. So you can't even spell after school. Because remember, if the price and the revenue go in the same direction, it means the price had a heavier percentage. And so all I really need is this right here. And you guys can tell me differently. Once I have this, I know what the others are. So I know if I see elastic here and increase here, I've got to see the price going down. So it can't be a elastic. This price does decrease, but that should have been increase. So we're going to go there. Unit, I should see no change. So that's going to be eliminated. Inelastic is falling right into what I had right here. And it said when the price decreases, the total revenue should decrease. So this is not going to work. And E is going to be correct. There's a lot of different ways to organize this, but what I really want you guys to think of is whenever they have elasticity and total revenue, you want to go right to that total revenue test. Now again, I'm just like the ones that you're seeing here are just ones that a majority of everyone in the class was getting wrong. The marginal benefit of consuming a good is, you want to remember that the very first thing that I think about, and I haven't even read these questions since I did a little bit with second period. You want to remember that the demand curve was also called the marginal benefit curve. And I'm writing that because maybe one of my answers is the demand curve. I don't see, I'm just kind of doing it really quickly and I don't see demand there. So this is when I'm going to have to read each answer individually. The change in the average utility, well, marginals never have anything to do with average. So I should knock that off right away. Is the same as total. Oh my gosh, that should be a red light. No, no, no. Average and total and marginal are all different. Is equal to the marginal cost of a good. Although this could be true at one point. In fact, at our socially optimal, that would be true. But this is not good enough to be our real answer. So notice I'm not knocking it off. I'm saying it's potential, but there's a better answer there because this is too general. The marginal good, the marginal benefit of consuming a good is the change in total. Oh, as soon as I talk about costs, I'm done. The maximum amount a consumer is willing to pay for one more unit of the good. So this again is also having potential. Now, why is E the correct answer? For two reasons. Remember that the demand and the marginal benefit are the same. And we always say the demand is the maximum amount a consumer is willing to pay. So that willingness to pay is my first clue that this is the best answer. The second is it's got that marginal in there. One more unit of good. So E is going to be the better. So if you go to your AP Classroom for Micro, and then there should be a tab that says Results. And this was the 2019 Micro. You need to be in the Micro Classroom, not the Macro. And you guys can't see the questions. You can only see what numbers you guys got wrong. And just as I said, you guys can't see it, I realized I need to slow up a little bit because you might not have a chance to read everything if I'm going too fast. I have no idea why I went out of order, why I'm now back at 9. This is a multiple choice question, but I decided not to show you the choices because this is kind of leading into, let's take it as an FRQ. It's one of the ones where there are going to be some questions, you'll get the answer right away because it's something that's a number like this where you're calculating it. So you can eliminate very easily. And then there are multiple choice questions like the last one where there could be more than one answer. So I need to read each and every response. Here, they want to know what the marginal cost of the second unit. And given the table that I have, that means that I need this total cost in order to find that, because the marginal cost is going to be the change in total cost divided by the change in the quantity. So that's going to be 90 minus something divided by, whoopsie. Oh, I just made a mistake, didn't I? We don't want average. I thought my table, we need total. So I need something minus 130 over 2 minus 1. We need that total. We cannot get a marginal from the average, but I can get the total from the average, because the average total cost is equal to the total cost divided by the quantity. So that means that this 90 was equal to the total cost divided by 2. So we get 180, and Jessica, you are correct. So 180 minus 130 divided by 2 minus 1 is going to be 50. Now on this one, the possible distractor was actually what I was about to do, because I wasn't paying attention to that average. So be careful, because a distractor would have said, well, let's find the average of the first and then let's subtract those two. So try to remember that marginal is always based on the total, because it's addressing the change in the total. Can you guys read that, or do I need to make it a little bit bigger? Okay. Thank you, Lucy. Robert, you are correct for marginal. You can also use the total variable cost. In the case that we just did, it was easier to find the total cost. All right, are you guys ready? Okay, I'm going to do this forward and backwards. And what I mean backwards is I am going to take a look at some of the choices to make sure you understand why they're not correct. Here, the firm hires perfectly competitive market. And what we want to remember is we automatically assume, and this is an acceptable assumption, that firms are profit maximizing. So if they're going to hire a certain amount of labor, we know that the marginal factor cost needs to equal the marginal revenue product. And they said that it's a profit maximizing firm in a perfectly competitive market. So that means we just did an FRQ very similar to this. This means the price times the marginal in the product, it's going to be the marginal revenue. Okay. And then the factor cost is going to be that hourly wage of 20, because it's in a perfectly competitive. We know that it's going to be 10 units. Actually, I'm sorry, this was supposed to be marginal product, not revenue. Price times the marginal product. So the marginal product is going to be 10, and I need my price. So my price is going to be $2. Now, did you guys notice that I said price, but it was actually asking about marginal revenue? And that's because it's in a perfectly competitive market. So price is equal to marginal revenue. Yep. Yep. This is the only case that we can say this, because the firm was a perfectly competitive market. Now, things that I want to point out for you, it says the marginal revenue increases as more output is produced. Now, this we should automatically knock out if we remember what any marginal revenue curve looks like. Our two options for marginal revenue is either perfectly horizontal, which is the case for the perfect competitor, or it would be downward sloping if we were in a non-competitive market. So to say that it's increasing totally disregards those two. The reason it can never be increasing is because of the law of diminishing marginal utility, because our utility is going to decrease, which means we're less willing to pay those higher prices. Increases at first and then decreases. Well, as soon as it says increases for the same reason, we got to knock it off. Down here, it looks great because it says decreases, but then it goes to that increasing. Some of you may pick up what they're doing here as a strategy for distractors. They're starting to describe the marginal cost curve, because we do bring in cost. So you just want to be careful that you're focused on the correct curve. All right, let's do another one here. This is a very tricky question. This is why we want to draw it. So it says that assume the demand curve is perfectly inelastic. So that's a perfectly vertical demand curve. And then we have our supply curve. And it says the production of each unit of good generates an external cost, right? So this right here would be our marginal private cost. This is just what we did today. So it's going to generate an external cost, which means my marginal social cost is above. Because this is perfectly inelastic, my current quantity that's being produced is not going to change. Letter A is a good distractor because it talks about those external costs. And we know that a negative externality typically does generate a deadweight loss. But this is what I was telling you in class today, that you need to be careful and not memorize that. Like, have it in your head saying, this is a possible situation that could occur, but let me go back and let me double check. Where's the socially optimal quantity versus the quantity that's going to be produced in that market? So because it was a perfectly inelastic demand curve, they could change the price all they want, and they are not going to change that socially optimal quantity. Which happens here with this negative externality. If the government wanted to try to impose a tax, they would actually just transfer it totally to the consumer. This is one of those situations where the burden of the tax would be totally on the consumer, because you can't get much more inelastic than perfect. Questions on this one? Now, do you guys see how drawing the graph really helped here? Because many of you guys went right to A. That was the most often chosen incorrect answer for this multiple choice. All right. I took off the answer choices for this one, because again, it was one that I felt like if we read it correctly, assume the government imposes a $4 per unit tax. So I'll let you guys take a minute and you tell me, what is the price paid by the buyers, received by the sellers, and the deadweight loss? Good job, Jessica. Vincent, Robert, good job. Now, it's a multiple choice question, so you wouldn't have to remember dollar symbols, but just keep that in mind when you're doing FRQs. Good job, Aaron. Oops. Okay, so what I want to remind you here, I've got 3 or 4 people have answered, so I'm going to go ahead and start. What I want to remind you is the per unit tax is going to shift the supply curve vertically by $4. So a lot of us will start at the equilibrium because we're naturally drawn there, and we might try to go up $4 here, but we don't know like what's $4 because there's nothing there. So we can go to any point on our supply curve and shift it up by $4 and kind of put a little ST there for supply with tax. And so that's going to tell us that this is the amount that's paid by the buyer, is that new equilibrium. But remember, the $4 tax is going to go to the government. So we come to the supply curve to find out that the seller is going to only receive $4. And then the deadweight loss is this area right here. And that's 1/2 times 4, the per unit tax, times 100, which is the quantity that we lost. So this would have been 200, right? 4 divided by 2. What's the tax revenue, just out of curiosity? Good job. All right. So remember, when a tax is instituted or imposed, the price for at that quantity, we go from the quantity to the demand curve will give you the price the buyer will pay, and we go to the supply curve to figure out what the seller will receive. Okay, Camilla. Okay, so these, this is one of the big things that we're going to touch on Thursday. It's going to be the first thing that we do when we get in there. It says at the 10th unit, the marginal cost is 130 and the average total cost is 150. We want to remember that the marginal, which is representing the additional, is going to impact the average. So here we have that the marginal cost of 130 is less than the average total cost of 150. Okay, so what this means is when I add the next unit, it's going to have a smaller cost than all of the other units. So in order to create a new average, this is going to pull the average total cost down. Okay, and that's going to happen for the 11th unit. So when I'm looking over here, this is the first thing I think of. Now I'm looking, I don't see anything for the 11th. So then I need to be thinking about, well, let me go before the 10th, right? So if the 10th is going to increase it by 130, then I have to go backwards, because if the 11th is going to decrease, 9 is going to go up. So that's why it's going to be higher than 150. And some of you guys may have been able to get that answer quicker than I did. I'm just showing you what I try to memorize the least amount, and then I try to apply it. So I always memorize going forward, and then if I need to, I'll go backwards. Excellent. Robert just put in the chat that he drew a graph. I told you guys the graphs are awesome. So drawing a graph is really good. In fact, when you're doing your multiple choice, I don't know how they're doing it. I think Audrey Benford told me it said somewhere, no notes are allowed. And I don't know, but I would tell you, if anything, the very first thing you should do is you should draw your graphs. You don't have to draw them over and over again. Draw them once so that you have something to reference. Sometimes you'll have to draw it over because you'll want to draw it specific to the information, but just having that general, firm graph with the marginal cost and the average costs, you have that up there and all the costs relationships are right in front of you. Which of the following occurs as a result of the substitution effect of an increase in the price of a normal good? This word is what should help you to eliminate 3 of them automatically. This is in your little black book. Go ahead and put in the chat what number you think the answer is. Good job, Jessica. Hannah, good job. Therese, good job. Vincent, let's take a look here. Okay, the substitute effect is describing why the demand curve is downward sloping. So if there's a change in price, there's an increase in price, that's moving me along the demand curve. So whenever I see the word effect, substitution effect, income effect, I'm automatically canceling out anything that talks about demand. So I need to go to the quantity demanded. This is going to be of the actual good that we're talking about. All right. This is one that I think that if we study that never, ever, ever forget page, we should breeze through this type of question. Which of the following combinations of output, price, and economic profit is consistent with the profit maximizing monopolist? So let's go with output first. In the chat, what's my output? Good job, Jessica. Good job, Aaron. Lucy, Stephanie. Okay, excellent. Everybody got the Q1. Good job. What's the price? Good job. Excellent. Oh, you guys are making me so happy. Go right up. This is the kind of graph we want to be careful of. This is what you could be getting on the FRQ. Do you see how many extra lines we have in there? So if you're given this, this right here should automatically just be scratched out. You want to ignore that always. I can't think of a question they could ask you where you'd actually want that number. The economic profit, we're now going to have to use it as a box. So what is our economic profit? And it has to be 4 vertices in the correct order. So if you were doing a box, you know, like you wouldn't want to do P1I, P4L. Oh. Oh, I saw EPs and I thought that was part of the profit. I'm like, Jessica, where are you getting that EP from? Okay, so I always start with the revenue piece. So I always start with that price. So I know that I'm going to change my thing here. I'm always going to start with this part because that is my total revenue, right? So I'm going to start with P4 and I. Then I need to go down to my average total cost. That's going to give me an M, and I'm going to go over to P2. Now this is if I use all of the letters. Lucy, I'll take that as well. You can also, because all it says, if this were an FRQ, it would say using labels from the graph. So you could totally say P4 minus P2 times Q1. So either way will get you the points because both of them are using labels from the graph. Now in this particular multiple choice question, it had it labeled with the vertices. Okay. So be careful when you come down and do P2 minus P1, you fell into that trap of using the part of the line that we said we're never ever going to use. We get brain freezes every once in a while. It's okay.